In the last episode, we explored an uncomfortable possibility that ancient civilizations, particularly those in Egypt, may have possessed a working knowledge of frequency and vibration that rivals and probably exceeds what we understand today. We examined the idea that vibration may not have been symbolic or spiritual, but biological, and that controlled frequency could influence the human body itself, possibly even extending life. But if that knowledge existed, then there's a second question we can't avoid. What else could they do with it? So settle in, clear your mind, because we're about to begin channeling history. If you understand frequency deeply enough, you don't just affect biology, you affect matter itself. Modern science tells us something that still hasn't fully sunk in culturally. Nothing is truly solid. At the most fundamental level, all matter is energy in motion. Atoms vibrate, molecules oscillate, structures resonate. Stone is not still, metal is not inert. Even the human body is a constantly shifting field of vibration. This is not philosophy, this is physics. Every object in the universe has what is known as a natural resonant frequency, the specific rate at which it prefers to vibrate. And when an external frequency matches that internal resonance, the rules begin to change. When resonance is achieved, energy transfer becomes efficient. Instead of fighting mass, you cooperate with it. Instead of forcing movement, you invite it. At resonance, less energy is required to create change. Structural resistance can be reduced. Materials behave in ways that appear impossible at first glance. This is why a singer can shatter a glass, not because of volume, but because of precision. The sound matches the glass's resonant frequency. The structure can no longer maintain its rigidity. It fails. Critics often say, sure, that works in small objects, but not stone blocks weighing tons. But physics does not change with size. Only energy requirements do. And here's the part we often overlook. Ancient civilizations had time. They were not rushing to meet deadlines. They were not constrained by modern production cycles. If you discover the correct frequency and can sustain it, the scale problem becomes an engineering problem, not a physical impossibility. We already use these principles even if we don't frame them this way. Modern applications include ultrasound, which passes through solid tissue, sonic welding, which fuses materials without heat, acoustic levitation, or sound waves suspend objects mid-air, resonant frequency testing used to find flaws in materials. In every case, vibration is doing work without direct physical force. Now consider this. These technologies were not discovered by accident. They were discovered by observation, experimentation, and refinement, the same way any technology is discovered. Here's the heart of the theory. What if resonance was not discovered recently, but rediscovered? What if ancient builders noticed that certain sounds traveled farther through stone, certain tones caused objects to feel lighter, certain vibrations caused structures to respond? And instead of dismissing it, they studied it, perfected it, and coded it into architecture itself. This reframes the entire question of ancient construction. Instead of asking, how did they lift the stones? We ask, how did they reduce the need to lift them at all? Instead of imagining brute force, we imagine precision knowledge. Knowledge that does not leave behind tool marks, broken stone, trial and error debris, but leaves behind something else entirely. Structures so exact, so stable, so enduring, that thousands of years later, we still struggle to explain them. So the core premise is this. If a civilization understands frequency well enough, they can manipulate matter in ways that appear impossible to those who do not. And once you accept that premise, the pyramids stop being impossible. They stop being miraculous. they become something far more unsettling. They become evidence. At this point, none of this should sound hypothetical, because resonance is no longer a fringe concept. It is quietly embedded into modern science and engineering, and in many cases, it was discovered accidentally. Consider ultrasound. It sends high-frequency sound waves through solid matter, not around it, through it. Those waves reflect differently depending on density, composition, and structure. That alone should challenge the idea that sound is weak. Now consider sonic welding. Two solid materials are fused together without melting. No flame, no glue, no traditional force, only vibration applied at precise frequencies. The material reorganizes themselves at a molecular level. In controlled laboratory environments, scientists have used sound waves to suspend objects in mid-air. No magnets, no strings, no physical contact. Standing wave patterns create pressure differentials strong enough to counteract gravity, temporarily. Again, not by brute force, but by resonance. Engineers use resonant frequency testing to locate weaknesses in bridges, aircraft, and buildings. They do this because at resonance, stress becomes visible. Materials reveal their limits, sometimes catastrophically. History even provides warnings. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapsed not because of wind, but because wind-induced vibrations matched the bridge's natural frequency. Resonance destroyed it. If resonance can penetrate solid matter, rearrange molecular bonds, counteract gravity in controlled conditions, destroy massive structures unintentionally, then it can also be used deliberately, with enough knowledge, with enough control, with enough time. Resonance stops being a curiosity and becomes a tool. Here's the part rarely discussed. We can use resonance, but we still don't fully understand why frequencies produce effects that scale beyond expectation. Some materials respond unpredictably. Some amplify energy rather than dissipate it. Some structures resonate in ways that exceed their input energy. These are active areas of research, not settled science, which means we are not at the end of this story. We may be somewhere in the middle. Modern science proves resonance works. Ancient structures prove someone understood it deeply. The only difference is that they left no instruction manual behind, only stone. Once you understand resonance as a real usable force, the pyramids stop being a mystery of labor and become a mystery of knowledge. The Great Pyramid is composed of more than 2.3 million stone blocks. Many weigh between 2 and 5 tons. Some exceed 50 tons, and yet they are stacked, aligned, and fitted with a level of precision that defies even modern construction methods. Not roughly placed, not approximately aligned, but engineered to exacting standards across an entire structure the size of a mountain. The conventional explanation relies on massive workforces, wooden sleds, long earthen ramps, sheer repetition over decades. This explanation raises serious issues. Wooden sleds do not survive the archaeological record. Ramps of the required size would rival the pyramid itself, yet no trace remains. And even if the stones were dragged, that does not explain the precision of placement, the lack of cumulative error, the near-perfect alignment to true north, or the internal consistency of the structure. Brute force explains movement. It does not explain precision. So instead of asking, how did they lift the stones, we ask a different question. What if lifting was never the primary challenge? If resonance can reduce effective weight, if vibration can temporarily alter how materials resist force, then moving stone becomes less about strength and more about control. Limestone is not just abundant in Egypt, it is acoustically responsive. Granite, used deep inside the Great Pyramid, is even more interesting. Granite contains high levels of quartz. Quartz is piezoelectric, meaning it responds to pressure and vibration by generating electric charge. This is not speculation. This is a measurable material property. If you were designing a structure meant to interact with vibration, granite would not be an accident. Imagine a construction process where stones are vibrated at their resonant frequency. Friction with the ground is reduced. Weight is effectively managed not eliminated. Placement is slow, deliberate, and precise. No rushing, no brute force, just incremental alignment. Over time, this method would leave behind clean stone faces, minimal tool damage, no evidence of trial and error, exactly what we see. If this knowledge existed, why was it lost? Because resonance is not a tool. It is a technique. It requires sensory awareness, repetition, tuning, and experiential understanding. It does not translate easily into written plans. It is learned by doing. And once a civilization collapses, that knowledge disappears with the people who practiced it. Here's the most overlooked point. The pyramid itself may have been part of the technology, not just the end product. Its shape, its internal chambers, its stone composition, all may have contributed to controlled resonance during construction. In other words, the pyramid may have helped build itself, not autonomously, but as a resonant system that amplified, stabilized, and guided vibration. This reframes ancient builders not as primitive laborers, but as engineers operating under a different paradigm. Not force-based engineering, but frequency-based engineering. A paradigm that leaves fewer traces, requires less infrastructure, and looks impossible once forgotten. Which is exactly why thousands of years later, we are still asking the wrong questions. If resonance was used in construction, then the pyramids were never impossible. They were inevitable. Inevitable results of a civilization that understood something about reality that we are only now beginning to rediscover. If the pyramids were a single anomaly, they could be dismissed, but they aren't. Across the world, we find megalithic structures that share the same impossible traits. Enormous stone blocks, extreme precision, advanced geometry, minimal evidence of primitive construction methods, and most importantly, they appear to be older than the civilizations credited with them. This theory only holds together if we confront a reality that modern history is deeply uncomfortable with. That some of the world's most advanced ancient structures may be far older than their accepted dates. The Great Pyramid is traditionally dated to around 2500 BCE, but that date rests largely on the dynastic association, not construction evidence. There is no inscription inside the Great Pyramid stating it was built by Khufu. What we see instead are signs of reuse, not origin, and Egypt is not alone. In modern-day Lebanon lies Baalbek. Its massive foundation platform contains the famous Trilithon stones, each weighing between 800 and 1,000 tons. The Romans did not move these stones. They built on top of them, which tells us something crucial. Even Rome, with all its engineering power, inherited something it could not replicate. Now across the Atlantic, at sites like Pumapunku, Sacsayhuaman, and Machu Picchu, we see the same pattern again. The oldest construction layers are the largest, the most precise, the most technically demanding. As time moves forward, the stonework becomes smaller, rougher, simpler. This is not technological progress. It is technological decline. This points towards a radical possibility that these sites are not isolated achievements, but survivors. Survivors of a global civilization that existed before recorded history. A civilization whose primary technology was not combustion, not metallurgy, not engines or explosives, but frequency, vibration, and harmonics. A civilization that engineered with nature, not against it. Our modern world advances through fire, through pressure, through combustion, through force applied outward. But this earlier civilization may have followed an entirely different path, one based on natural resonance, harmonic interaction, precise tuning of materials. This would explain why we find incredible precision, minimal construction debris, no evidence of large-scale industrial waste. Their technology didn't scar the landscape, it worked with it. So what happened? The geological record offers a candidate. The Younger Dryas, roughly 12,800 years ago, a sudden climatic catastrophe, massive flooding, wildfires, rapid cooling. Some researchers, such as Graham Hancock, argue this was triggered by fragmented comet impacts. Others, like Randall Carlson, point toward extreme solar events and planetary instability. Different mechanisms, same result. A near total collapse of civilization. Knowledge lost. If such a civilization existed, it would have been almost entirely erased. Coastal cities drowned, populations scattered, survivors forced back into hunter-gatherer lifestyles. Not because they were primitive, but because survival came first. And when survival takes over, knowledge disappears. This explains something archaeologists rarely address head-on. At ancient sites worldwide, the older the construction, the more advanced it appears. Later cultures inherit the structures, attempt to replicate them, but do so with declining precision. This is not evolution, it is forgetting. And nowhere is this clearer than the Great Sphinx of Giza. The body of the Sphinx shows deep vertical erosion. This type of erosion comes from prolonged rainfall, not desert wind. Egypt has not experienced sustained heavy rainfall since the end of the Ice Age. That places the body of the Sphinx thousands of years older than dynastic Egypt. Now look at the head. It is too small, out of proportion, and far less eroded than the body beneath it. This strongly suggests the head was recarved. In other words, the structure was already ancient, and later rulers reshaped it, claimed it, put their own image on something far older than themselves. This mirrors what we see globally. Romans at Baalbek, Incas in Peru, dynastic Egyptians at Giza, later civilizations inheriting impossible structures and doing the only thing they could do, repurposing them, claiming them, rewriting their origin stories. If this is true, then the pyramids are not the beginning of civilization, they are remnants. The Sphinx is not a monument to a pharaoh. It is evidence of a world that came before him, a world built on harmonics and on resonance, on a knowledge system that vanished almost overnight. And what remains are the stones that refuse to forget. What we've explored here isn't a rejection of science, it's an expansion of it. Modern physics tells us that reality is not static, that matter is not inert, that everything vibrates. What ancient builders may have understood, intuitively, experimentally, or systematically, is that frequency is not just a property of the universe, it is a tool capable of interacting with biology, with stone, with structure itself. If a civilization learned to work with resonance instead of against it, then massive construction would not require massive force. It would require precision. And if that civilization existed before the cataclysms of the Younger Dryas, then its near total destruction would explain why this knowledge vanished almost overnight. The survivors would not have carried machines with them, they would have carried stories, echoes, fragments of understanding that slowly degraded over generations, which explains why the oldest stonework on Earth is often the most advanced, why later cultures built on top of foundations they could not reproduce, why pharaohs, emperors, and kings claim monuments they did not create, and why structures like the pyramids and the Sphinx feel less like beginnings and more like messages left behind. Messages carved into stone by people who understood something fundamental about reality that we are only now beginning to rediscover. History wants us to know. All we have to do is keep channeling history.